We're getting into a topic that's actually pivotal in the research that I'm currently doing right now. Now, as you know, the title of our show is, we're looking at the history of secret societies and Planet X. What have they known? How long have they known it? Well, to me, we always talk about that. The question is what they're doing about it. And I'll tell you, I have been working on this, doing some research with another fellow who's actually been on the show before, Richard St. Laurent. And we started looking into a comparison between the Avebury 2008 formation that I decode in a series of 50 slides in my book, Crossing the Cusp. And what we found was that the exact same celestial alignment for Planet X appears in a cathedral that was built in France some 500 years ago. And it was really amazing. And it's what you call a spot, a single point of truth. You start there, and then it starts taking you into other places. And you really start seeing things go blink, 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 blink. It's like lights coming on in a stadium. And it's a huge picture. And so how does that bring me to this conversation with Dan Dean? I've known Dan for years. Fine gentleman. He's been on the show before, both this show and Cut to the Chase. And you never know what you're going to be talking about, and I guess, until you start talking about it. And I got into discussing this with Dan and found that, my gosh, my golly, he is a huge source of information. And so with that, I'm going to bring Dan in, and we're going to get right into what's going on here. Dan, welcome to Planet X Special Report.
Good to be with you this evening.
Hey, it's good to see you, Dan. And, what I wanted to do was kind of start with that little bit of research I'm doing with St. Laurent, which is really going to be used for a video that I'm planning to put on YouTube later this summer.
Okay.
And this is the Chartres Cathedral in France. You're familiar with that?
Sure, yeah. It's the fourth stop on the 7 steps of enlightenment for the Masonic order.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let me tell you what we found, and then you just bounce off of that. How's that?
I'd love to.
Okay. And while we're doing that, for those of you out there, we've got Bill running the switchboard, and he's doing the call screening. And so if you got questions, you want to jump into this and have a little fun with us on the air, well, by golly, do that. Just call right on in, or you can Skype right on in from the episode page. That guest call-in number is 818-495-6962. Bill will take that screening call, and he'll want to know your name, location, and what you got in mind. And in the chat room, we have Sue from Mexico. Hello, Sue. I know you can't talk back except in the chat room, but if you've got a question out there in the virtual studio, folks, and you want to make sure that we cover that with our guest, make sure it comes to Sue's attention. And these folks both volunteer their time freely to Planet X Special Report, and they bring a huge amount of value to the show, make it ever so much more than it was before. Now, with that, let me talk about this Chartres Cathedral, because I was researching this with Richard St. Laurent, and he found that there is an astronomical clock that's in there, and it was built in this cathedral about 500 years ago, which was built by Freemasons. And as you pointed out, is in the 4th step, Dan. And what we found interesting was that the alignment is showing the actual trajectory for Planet X. And when you compare it to the Avebury 2008 formation that I document in my book, wow. I mean, it's just stunning. And when we looked at that, our jaws dropped. It's like, how do you have a 500-year-old church coinciding with the 2008 crop circle? So here comes the story, was that when the church was first built, it had this astronomical clock, and the best way, I guess, to describe that is, folks, when you're in school, in science classes, there's an orrery, and this is just a little mechanical device. It's got a representation of the sun and then the planets and moons going around it. And it's just a big old mechanical, like a big old grandfather's clock turned on its side, so to speak. And that's an orrery. Well, an astronomical clock, such as the Freemasons built 500 years ago, functioned somewhat like an orrery. It was in about the center of the Chartres Cathedral. But the interesting thing was it worked that way until the French Revolution. And then at the time of the French Revolution, two things happened to this astronomical clock. One, the mechanism was removed. And two, something was added to the face of the clock, and the dial was frozen at this trajectory for planet X. And it remained that way for hundreds of years until 2009. Abe Berry was in 2008. In 2009, there was an order placed by the caretakers, the custodians of the cathedral, to a special order of priests who all they do is repair old timepieces of any kind. That's their specialty. That they were told not to make the clock operational. That's interesting. Instead, the clock face was flipped and it was changed. And here's the kicker. It was changed to represent the orbit of Comet Elenin. And that happened in 2009. As Forrest Gump would say, it gets curiouser and curiouser. And so my question to you, Dan, is that just a big old coinky-dink?
Is it a coincidence? Well, the Comet Elenin is very interesting. I can tell you that the fact that the clock was stopped on the date of the alignment of Planet X, or this brown dwarf that we keep talking about, I don't believe it's a coincidence at all. This particular church is of the Order of the Lion of Masonic history. It's incredibly rich. It's one of the more powerful experiences for the Masons who go through 7 steps of enlightenment. And each step has a particular church, 7 churches across the world that they're supposed to visit, and there's a particular chakra associated with the body that it's supposed to open up and enhance and make them be illuminated or become awakened. And this particular church is the lion. Once you achieve the level of the lion, you visit the Sun Oracle. And this is what you're talking about, is the Sun Oracle in the church there. And the Sun Oracle is a very interesting piece, because this is where people become aware during the lion of the writings of Mercury pertaining to the history of kings on another planet, let's call it that, just another place, another, we have to go back to the theory of ancient astronauts here. We're only talking about another solar system that's orbiting ours, so now I have to talk about the theory of ancient astronauts, because in the writings of Mercury, which is something that the Masons read all the time, in every step they go through and they're able to read certain writings of Mercury, which is one of the gods. He was the god of communication of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, and even before that, the Egyptians and Sumerians. So he was the one who documented things for people to learn and taught them the things from the lowercase gods that we supposedly had visit here on the Earth. And in science, we call those ancient astronauts, if one wants to, believe that school of thought. But for here, we need to talk about that. So each time a Mason goes through and takes a new order, they are allowed to read new writings from Mercury, which give them an otherworldly perspective of our world. And this is the point at which they understand that there is now another inhabited planet or set of planets with more people on it that we interact with. So this is the 4th level. This is where they learn this. And so it's by no coincidence do I believe that the Sun Oracle, which has this astronomical time clock on it, is their 4th visit. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. I think it's part of the steps of realization of knowledge beyond ourselves and becoming aware of a intergalactic or even an intra-universal species of beings, all over the universe. That sounds a little far out, I know, but if we understand the Masons, if we understand the Masons, that's what they're all about. So, and I know most people don't see the Masons as that. We see them as the good people who are there serving coffee and doing good things and being active in politics, and they are all of those things, and they're very influential, and some are extremely powerful. Some of our presidents were Masons, and the 40 some odd of the people who signed our Declaration of Independence were Masons. So some of our greatest scientists, were Masons. In fact, some of them were Grand Masons. They were very high in the order. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. I've got something to kind of throw out at you, but we can talk about that later.
Okay. Well, if you got something to throw at me, I got something to throw at you.
Go ahead. You
and
throw
it's a
back
direct
first.
Question. Okay. All right. That's good. All right. It's a low ball. I get a lot of letters from folks now. I mean, it's popping up, and they're asking me, are the Anunnaki returning? And the Anunnaki, as described by Zecharia Sitchin in The 12th Planet and his whole series of books, are you willing to put a label on it? Are you saying they're waiting for this other race? Are they waiting specifically for the Anunnaki? Do you see any hint of a connection there?
I'm not going to say that it's specifically the Anunnaki. I believe that from my research, and my beliefs are not necessarily what someone else needs to believe, but I hold the opinion that the Anunnaki are a genetically superior race to our own. I believe that they were instrumental in what we call the Greco-Roman gods and the gods of even Sumeria and of Egypt. They have powers that are greater than our own. I also think that there are other interventions. And I want people for a moment just to consider the possibility. You don't have to believe this, and I know it's going to give some people a hard time, but we're in a very small rock in an extremely huge, vast universe. It's pretty selfish for us to say that we are the only life in the entire universe, and that life has only existed in the universe for 10,000 years, and that we're it, guys. That's not a very, even looking at probability, that just isn't a very good perspective.
It's arrogant.
Well, I would say it is arrogant because,
it's arrogant.
The universe has been here, our planet has been here for 4 billion years. Think about how long, and we've got a young sun. Think about the old suns out there and the old galaxies. What about life out there in those places? And what about they could be 500,000 years into, science and have all sorts of space travel and be able to do things that we're still dreaming about. And they have the ability to visit our planet. And one of the reasons they would want to visit our planet would be because it's a beautiful planet. It has water and it has an atmosphere, and it's really enjoyable to live here on the surface. You don't have to live below the surface in order to really enjoy the beauty of the planet. That would make it highly sought after by multiple races if they were aware of the planet. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind, that it's kind of like a beautiful, the beautiful land in the Middle East, the conflict between, various countries for the Temple Mount or, Palestine or Jerusalem. It's a beautiful, Palestine's known as the beautiful land, and there's some areas of it that really are pretty. I think they were a lot prettier several thousand years ago, but anyway, in that light, there is a lot of scientific, archaeological, and historical information that has been left imprinted on our planet as a thumbprint, so to speak, that these ancient astronauts have been here. One of those that you mentioned would have been the Nineveh Archives, which Zecharia Sitchin was one of 8 translators that began translating these Sumerian tablets into English and to other languages, and he put out his first book called The Lost Book of Enki, spelled E-N-K-I, and it was just a literal translation of a set of those texts, and it was scribed. It was the inscription by scribe of the words of an ancient astronaut by the name of Enki. And Enki talked all about other worlds, he described every planet in our solar system, including Pluto, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, which we hadn't even seen 6,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago, okay? And this was all written back then from a being who supposedly visited our Earth looking for gold to supposedly try to patch holes in the ozone of their own failing atmosphere in their planet. They had holes in their ozone. It was allowing heat to escape, and they needed it. Now, that happens to be, they say, that they are the inhabitants of one of the planets of this brown dwarf that we call Planet X, coincidentally. Nonetheless, he had a lot of family. He had a father by the name of Anu, and their people were called the Anunnaki. Now, are they coming back? Well, it seems like whenever this sun, brown dwarf, comes around, that they tend to kind of jump over here to do a few things, maybe to get a load of gold or for their atmosphere, which they've been mining according to their testimony for 400,000 years here on Earth. So I won't go into that into all that detail. Do I think they're going to return? Yes, I think they probably will revisit the Earth if some of them aren't still here, which is very much a possibility because they look very much like us. It's just that they're usually larger and they usually have more capabilities than we do. And their sciences, of course, are incredibly advanced. Do I think that they're the only other race that has visited our Earth? No, I don't. I think there are multiple races that have visited our Earth over time.
I believe that. Well, but I mean, that's what, in the final analysis, when we look at these things, and there's so much secrecy that you have to wade through, what we get to work with really are crumbs. And so you have to take your best shot with that.
You do.
Now, it's really more of threshold issues as opposed to smoking gun issues. So on a threshold issue, I mean, you look at all of the activity and everything that's going on, and we look at the symbology, how the maneuvering is done, and I agree with you. We're in contact with multiple races. And part of me, I mean, now I've got to step back and say, okay, I mean, as a publisher of Alien Security in Anthology, we really went very heavily into an explanation of, through Maurice Osborne's story, originally published, Alien Security, that fictionalized a phenomenal wealth of actual hard nonfiction. Things have been reported and written about in the genre. And he kind of cobbled together in a story so people could get their heads around it. And the upshot of that was, after 47 at Roswell, where we really got into the guacamole, is that the government had an opportunity to forge alliances with different extraterrestrial species. There were peaceful and benign ones who would not share technology, and then there were exploitative races that would share technology. And I guess in the quest of not the greater good, but the greater bomb, they went with the exploitative ETs, and it hasn't really worked out all that well. It was a bad call. And I think a lot of that is the reason why we're seeing a huge amount of suppression going on in England right now with crop circles. Because I think that the ETs that were in contact with us back then are the ones that are making a lot of these crop circles. They're circumventing the powers that be on the planet to carry their dialogue directly to humanity, and they have given us very clear messages that can decode in ASCII form, and actually we did that. It was the whole thing that brought about the Sagan Continuation Project. And you can read about that at yowsa.com, yowusa.com/SCP. It gives you that whole story where there was, back in 2002, Crabwood Formation. Remember the extraterrestrial holding the DVD? That crop circle formation.
Yes,
and that was very, very powerful. There's been others. And so the contact is being made. Now what's happening is that there's a huge amount of suppression going on, and at every level imaginable. I'm talking to the crappies, and they're just simply stunned. One, they're not really organized to deal with all of this suppression and intimidation and disinformation. And two, they just, a good example on this show, we had Suzanne Taylor, and, she was like most people. Well, it's coincidental, or, and it's hard to say, you can't see him, it's coming out of the dark. And then we had a show this show was absolutely brought down. We were brought down, period. And that was when Bill stepped up to the plate to help out with the engineering, so we have a little harder sight. And
we appreciate Bill.
And we sure do. We sure do. And, and don't worry, Bill, we'll find a way to give you a hard time later. But, you know, what they're facing right now is one of the things that's been helping the farmers was that the farmers were putting up honor boxes at the next to their fields. So when a formation appeared, people would put in the money and they could collect it. It would help offset the losses that they were sustaining, you know, by having a fairly good portion of their crops flattened. And now what's happening is somebody's going out, stealing these boxes or breaking into them, taking all of the money. The farmers are up in arms. They don't know what it is, and their only reaction, they just are frustrated. They've all decided they're going to start plowing under the formations before people can walk the fields, thinking maybe if they do that, the formations will stop coming. Meanwhile, one guy who is an alleged hoaxer now has a full-time radio talk show, and he's out there just blowing smoke all the time. On top of that, you have like National Geographic goes out, interviews everybody, and then comes back and puts up a twisted piece of propaganda in favor of the hoaxers. They're getting harassed by helicopter overflights, all kinds of grief and nonsense, disinformation, personal attacks, and these are just peaceful, decent, wonderful people out there doing what they do for love, and they're getting harassed. The whole point of it is that somebody is suppressing it, and I think we're going to have a strong season this year. Going into August, we could very well see a very significant formation. That is, if it can get through all of this Machiavellian interference. And so my thinking is that the ETs that the government didn't want to do business with are trying to talk to us because they care about us. This is one race to another. I think they care about us for the same reason that we, you know, folks get out into these ships and try and get between the whalers and the whales to keep them from killing the animals. That there's that basic love for life, and you don't have to get paid to it. You know, maybe the whole rest of the universe is not going, greed is good, greed is good, greed is good. Maybe, you know, they're more enlightened than we are. And then maybe there's the bunch of them that are, yeah, greed is good, too. You know, it's a mixed bag. I mean, in everything that you're seeing with this, question in my mind, obviously Freemasons are pointing to this. We're looking at it. Secret societies are looking at this. There's this obvious concern about us coming into open contact. In other words, open in the sense that it's so obvious that nobody can be humiliated into silence anymore. That, you know, it's there. You know, boom, they land on the White House lawn, whatever we expect. But in terms of the way the secret societies are jostling around, Dan, do you see them trying to connect with the benign races, or are they trying to connect with the other ones that we really would be better off without? You know, I mean, just on a speculative basis, what does your gut tell you?
My opinion at this point is that they are very aligned, very deeply aligned with strong allegiance toward a dangerous race. And I'm not going to say that they're going to, this is not a race that I don't think is going to be like, you know, a Battle of L.A. where they come in and blow away the earth. I feel that their desire is to bring about a one-world government. This was not a plan that was initiated within the human race. This came from outside. And it is in every secret culture, including the Skull and Crossbones, which is the most famous one that was brought out that George Bush Jr. was a member of. And he said, yes, I'm a member, but that's all I can tell you about it. So, and it's just another one of these high-order secret societies that are small sects within the Masonic realm, the Masonic order, just like, you know, there's other ones. The Illuminati is one, the Priory of Sion, you know, you have all these different sects that are special interest groups, so to speak, within the Masonic group. I think that, and I'll kind of give an overview here.
Yeah. Let's do an overview for the folks out there, because we kind of jumped real deep into stuff, and I could just see folks out there going, "Give me some context here," you know. So okay. Let's take a. You know, you remember those movies from the 70s, the ones that they'd go time travel, you know, doodly-doo, 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 doodly-doo. Let's do that. Let's kind of back up doodly-doo here to a big picture and talk about Planet X and secret societies. And when do you think there was that first connection made with present-day secret societies?
Well, I'm going to say within the past couple of hundred years, it would have been within the early 1900s. Philip Schneider, which is a formal geophysicist that designed underground mining systems for very high-speed drilling of transport systems underground. And it's used to connect it's how we connect all the deep underground military bases that we have. You know, they connect all over the world, and they're just these tunnels. And he was very key in developing that. In the early 1900s, they ran it upon a room, drilled into a room that had three beings that were not humanoid, and there was a horseshoe-shaped craft there in this room. They were not happy that they had encroached upon their room, and they backed out as quickly as they possibly could, and a full report was made by the security, which were government security. And I understand Philip Schneider had the highest order of security clearance a civilian can have in the world. And he was there, you know, he saw these men, and the actual security guards that were with him, the military that was with him, reported that. He was, of course, sworn to secrecy, but later on in his life came out and started talking about what was happening within the U.S. government. And he wasn't talking about the Masons specifically, but he was talking about a plan to usurp the Constitution. And when he found that out, he turned and started exposing everything. And after 12 attempts, well, on the 13th attempt of his life, he was killed, which happens to people who talk, just like JFK, and attempts were, you know, attempted on Nixon, and et cetera. People who, and well documented in your book, you know, Alien Security, that JFK is going to come out and tell the people exactly the way it is, and they can't allow him. And that's the way it is. You know, there are things that high order, powerful people in the world do not want the common man to know, because if we did, two things would happen. If we
Dan,
not
can I
have
ask
time,
you, Dan, before you get into that, I'm getting feedback from Sue in the virtual room. If you can get a little more volume in your voice, please.
Well, I'll try to talk louder. How's that?
There you go.
I think the volume control on my phone's up as far as it'll go, but I'll sure try.
Well, you're soft-spoken. You're soft-spoken. So, and Sue out there, let me know if that works for you. Go on. You had the two things.
Right. The two things that they feel that if we were to see this or to know this information all at once, that it would cause panic among the people, demanding certain things, certain safety measures to be in place that are impossible to put in place, so the government feels. So they want to keep this under wraps. Number two, if the people would know, then they would also be able to capitalize upon the opportunity. And they don't want the people, the common people, to capitalize upon the opportunity. Now, you're going to have to explain the opportunity here. So let me now digress back in time. Let's say,
Okay, back.
Let's say we are back 6,000 BC. We have visitors, ancient aliens here on the Earth that have superior technology. They have superior telegenesic, telepathic, telekinetic capabilities. Telegenesic being the ability to form matter or energy into matter in a shape by using their mind. This is described very explicitly in the Lost Book of Enki by Zechariah Sitchin, that their people have this capability. Okay, so here we are. We're humanoids. You know, we're like, wow, these guys must be gods because we can't do this stuff. So, you know, let's find the most powerful one, and I'm going to serve him, and I'll go ask him to kick people who's, you know, bully me or whatever the case may be, okay? So we have these people who, you know, we build Parthenons and castles and cathedrals and temples to them out of these incredible, you know, monolithic structures for them. And then we sit here and ask, well, how do they move this 300-ton piece of rock? You know, well, gosh, guys, these guys can fly. They have anti-gravity. They've already developed it. They know how to lift a 300-ton rock very easily, put all this in place. So time goes. They're communicating with the people here on Earth, and we're going back to Greco-Roman and Egyptian mythology, as we call it here. Now think about it. You've read about all this stuff in mythology, how some of the lowercase gods taught people that they happen to like about mathematics, about science, about astronomy, about astrology, about the history of the universes. And this one messenger that we call Mercury was the one who documented. He was a scribe, and he documented all this stuff, and he carried messages back and forth from the gods to the people of Earth. And interestingly enough, over a course of time, King Solomon came across a lot of these documents, and he buried them. And we're talking BC, 1100, 1200 BC here. We have lots of documents that were buried in the Nineveh archives, a lot of them that were buried in the Library of Alexandria, which were, unfortunately, much of it destroyed by the Roman Empire whenever they conquered Alexandria. But we did uncover a vast majority of the Nineveh archives, and we have many other ancient documents. Nonetheless, there was a set that was captured by King Solomon, known as the wisest man upon the earth. He was also incredibly wealthy, and he had these gold mines and all kinds of things that he supposedly did. And he hid these things beneath the Temple Mount in a secret vault. This was found out about by, now we're going to jump ahead many years now. We're going to jump ahead through the beginning of, and I'm going to include a bunch of Judeo-Christian and Muslim religion beginnings here. We're going to jump through 1500 A.D., which is when Abraham made the covenant with God and had two sons, which were Ishmael, which was the founder of the Nation of Islam, or the Islamic religion, and then Isaac, which was the founder of the Judaic religion, which became the Judeo-Christian religion. Okay, then we jump to the birth of Christ. Then we jump up to about the 12th century, about 1100 A.D. Now, all these documents, many documents, have been found and stored by conquering in wars, and much of that is reserved in the Vatican archives and in the secret archives of the Vatican. Documents that are hundreds and hundreds and even thousands of years old. Some of that's available to us, and some of it isn't, but it just depends on who you are and if you can get in there. In 1100, there was a group, the Vatican found out about these writings of Mercury. They were stored historically beneath the Temple Mount, and they needed a set of people who were strong and not weak to be able to go in and stay in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount and to find these documents for them and to bring them back to the Vatican under the auspices of the papacy. Well, they found a warring monk, group of monks who their purpose was to promise safe passage for people making the journey to the Holy Lands, because there were always robbers and villains that were jumping you around every corner trying to take whatever you got, your provisions, your money, kill you. And so they would guarantee safe passage. They found these men, and they had, as a background, knighthood, by the way, which is where they became warring, but they were sworn to poverty. They were sworn to poverty. And they did this just for contributions to stay alive. The papacy asked them, would you please go find these documents of Mercury, and you can find, you can keep whatever else is there, but we need those documents. Would you please do this? And the year is approximately 1119 right now. They move to Jerusalem, and they live in a mosque called the Al-Aqsa Mosque, I think is what it's called, which sits right on the Temple Mount over the former Solomon, the altar of the Temple of Solomon, where this is supposed to be hidden. Okay, now they're living there, and they're still providing all of the safe passage for people who are doing, the pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and they're doing it for contribution to keep them alive. But they're also working under the papacy now. Well, in 1129, all of a sudden, we don't know if they find something, but all of a sudden they return back to Rome, to the Vatican, and they are told at that point in time, in what's called a Council of Troyes in 1129, they became very well known because of the Pope bestowing great blessing on them for something that they had delivered to the Pope. Okay, they went back to Jerusalem for another 10 years. In 1139, they came back and had found, they suddenly picked up everything, and they moved everything they had. They rushed back to the Vatican, and whatever they gave the Vatican there, they were granted well, they were already knights, but this was by Pope Innocent II under something called the Omnidatum Optimum. There we go. Boy, I've got to always try to pronounce Latin correctly.
It's a tough one.
An edict, edict that says they shall bow the knee to no one except the Pope, that they can pass through any border, and that no one usurps their power except the Pope. And they were now granted a status of no taxes. They don't have any laws that they have to obey necessarily, although they're monks and they are knights. But they're now also become incredibly wealthy all of a sudden. And I don't believe that's because of the papacy. I believe that's because they found some of the wealth buried below the temple with all of these writings of Mercury. Interestingly enough, they didn't just give all these documents over to the papacy. They made copies of everything first because they wanted to study them. They were pretty interesting. They had some pretty interesting stuff in them. So now the Vatican has them. They analyze them. They don't like them. They call them heresy, which starts a little bit of a grudge between the Vatican and what are now called the Knights Templar, because they lived in a temple and they are knights, but they're warring monks. They are both monks, which are members of the papacy, granted a power over every king on the earth, and they are also knights. So they had the dual-edged power, which is, that was pretty remarkable for the time. And they began trying to find out what they can do with this money. They asked for donations. And I'm not going to give all the detail. This is not a dissertation on the Masons, but I'm trying to give a brief history of time here regarding them.
No, this is really important because
they read all.
This is important. This is important because you're really giving everyone. This is everything. You could have a mighty redwood, and it starts with a tiny little seed, in the palm of your hand, so to speak. And but you can't understand the redwood unless you look at the seed. And what you're really doing is that's what we're doing here right now, is that, the seed from which all of this sprang, because that is going to make it much easier for everyone to really get a bead on everything else, because otherwise you're up in the canopy and you don't know what's happening.
Well, these Knights Templar, which are highly honored men, start developing a set of traditions based upon the knowledge that they're learning from all of these writings of Mercury. And, you can imagine the writings of Mercury, all that was taught to the people in the ancient Chaldeans that we call Chaldean magic was simply astrology, which was the knowledge of ephemerical statistics using the stars. And even psychology will acknowledge that today. Astronomy and about stars and planets beyond our ability to see at this time, and describing them as the correct color and size and placements, and how they are a giant celestial clock that governs the fixed and the malleable events in people's lives, and about sciences and math and physics. And it's amazing, the things that they were taught. Well, they start reading this stuff that has been suppressed by just about every rise of a world empire. And I'll go through the 7 rises of the world empire real quick. We have the Egyptian, the Assyrian, the Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, the Greek, the Roman, and the German Empire. Those are the 7 rises of a world empire since the time of the ancient astronauts that were within the scope of time we're talking about here. There haven't been really any other world powers there, but that's the 7. Okay. So these guys are trying. They've learned something that keeps being snuffed out. It's like the Romans burning, all the books of Alexandria. It's like the Germans burning all the books in the streets, celebrating their victory. That people don't need books; they just need Hitler to lead them. And Antiochus Epiphanes, who founded the Roman Empire, was very much a malevolent man. He was very evil. He killed more Jews than Hitler ever even began to dream of killing, as just certain men, that come into place that start these countries, or start Alexander the Great. There's another one, the story of Alexander the Great. But let's get back to, the Masons here. They've learned a lot of information that has been suppressed over the ages. We're in the medieval times here, and this is right after the Dark Ages, where a lot of information was repressed. People didn't get to go to school. They only learned and were taken care of by their priests in the town. Priests were the only educated ones. Maybe the women who were in queens and princesses were educated well, but men were warriors, and they, listened to the queens who were well educated nonetheless. They start this order, and they actually have, during the 200 years of the Knights Templar, which is from about 1100 to about 1300 AD, they have Grand Masters and still have Grand Masters today. But they actually have people that developed to the rank of Grand Master, who kept the highest secrets and the highest knowledge. During that course of time, they developed a sort of a pilgrimage of the 7 steps of enlightenment that was taught to the Egyptians by the Anunnaki, these ancient astronauts. And every pharaoh, every priest went through these 7 steps of enlightenment. In fact, the Great Pyramid of Giza, in the ascending pathway, the ascending corridor, has a room in there that has 7 steps that each one gets wider and wider as it goes up in the room. And I'm talking about steps in the wall, not in front of you. It's just an ascending path, and the walls actually get wide in 7 distinct steps, and it actually taught, that's what it's representing, is the 7 steps of enlightenment of the Egyptians. That same thing that they're learning here. Okay, so the Masons learned about this. They set up a coursework for people that come in. By the time they started experiencing difficulty, they had 30,000 people in Europe alone. 30,000 members who had been initiated, going through all of these paths and learning about this stuff. But they would only let them learn a little bit at a time. It became a kind of a moral code that you only get to know what you're worthy to know. And today in Masons, a higher Mason of a higher order is never supposed to share anything with a lower Mason that he is unworthy of. In other words, he can't share anything higher, only of his level or lower. So this began in this 200 years while these men are putting together this structure. Well, there's a lot of interesting stories that come out of their meetings, their gatherings, from the common people around them. And they're, all kinds of strange things about worshiping the head of a person, and there's all kinds of different opinions about this beheaded head, just sitting there that they're worshiping, and other things that they do. And I won't get into all the rituals, but the church is having a problem with this because they see that they have seen this knowledge and that they're starting to bring back a sect of knowledge that you might want to call a religion, although it is just a spiritual growth, path of spiritual growth, that, there's many different paths of spiritual growth, and I think that I put them in black and white. You either devolve or you evolve spiritually. That's the 2 choices you can make. So these men are attempting to widen their perspective and to grow, and it's based around the 7 chakra that we have within our body. That's what the 7 steps of enlightenment are about. The church, specifically the papacy, is having a problem because they've read this too. They've declared it heresy. They've given this incredible amount of power to these men who are being greatly honored, and they're doing things that the Vatican doesn't like now, that they've declared as heresy.
Yes, be careful what you wish for. Yes.
And the other thing is that they have taken this wealth that they have taken, and they've found some loopholes in the law, the Vatican law. The Vatican law said that you cannot charge interest on money. It's called usury. But they found a way of loaning money to people by renting it. Here's your money, and you pay me rent every month for using the money. And they started loaning this to many, many people, including kings, and financing wars. And they became very wealthy. They continued to provide safe traveling to Jerusalem on the pilgrimage, but they also built an entire fleet of ships, and they became the masters of the Mediterranean Sea, and they guaranteed merchants safe travels to other countries and back for a fee, for a percentage and a fee. and they became very, very wealthy. Kings, English kings, French kings, namely, owed them a lot of money because they had lent them a lot of money, and they were getting frustrated. And they were jealous of their power. They were jealous that they had to, kneel the knee to no one but the Pope. Jealous of their money, and it finally came down to a point in time that King Philip had he went through several different gyrations to try to make them look really bad and to nail them, and he was not successful until finally he declared them to be devil worshippers. And on Friday, October the 13th of 1307, about 200 years after they were asked to help from the papacy, the church and King Philip raided the Masons, or the Knights Templar, and killed many of them, all the lower ones. They kept upper level men, and they tortured them with horrible methods of torture to make confessions of worshiping the devil and spitting on the cross and all kinds of things that would be sacrilege to the church, and blasphemy to them was a death offense. So this gave them the right and the ability, it ratified and justified what they were doing by killing people. And they were trying to, hold on just a second, I'm going to have to kill this other line.
Okay.
I'm back. And so they were pretty much just got rid of all of the people that they could find. However, whenever they raided the treasury and wanted to get the ships, many of the higher, or most of the high-level people were gone. All the ships but 3 were gone, and all the money was gone. And they didn't know where they went to. And somehow it had filtered in that, that this was going to occur, and they escaped. And they were not seen for some period of time until at least the 1400s, and people have surmised about where they came from. I would like to try to put 2 and 2 together real quick so we have a kind of a contiguous time period. It's very interesting.
Please.
Think about this. These men are bankers. This is really the first bank of the world, so to speak. And the bank is, they're loaning money to men. I mean, King Philip owe them a tremendous amount of money, and he didn't want to have to pay it back. So the best thing to do, which is a very good military tactic that's been used many times, is go attack the person you owe the money to, conquer them, and then you don't owe them money anymore, okay? You borrow money from them, go to war.
There is some, right, but there's something, who doesn't want, who hasn't had an impulse to kill a banker, right? You get your credit card statements.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could bust on Philip, but I mean, good Lord, how many people, guess what? You're paying 35% now, plus fees.
Yeah, exactly.
I want King Philip, but please, go ahead.
Okay. So these men are bankers, and they went somewhere in the world. Now, one of the problems that King Philip was having is they were wanting to create their own country within a portion of France. And there are other sects of knights that had already done that, had created their own countries. And he did not want that to happen within France. He did not want them taking over and annexing a portion of their country because they had more power than he did. Okay, he didn't want that to happen. So he's trying to run them off. Now they're trying to start a country. They're bankers, and they're warring monks. Amazingly enough, there's this little country called Switzerland that is a banking neutral country. It's the only one like it in the world. And the history and the foundation of the Swiss Federation started in 1291, which is 16 years before the extradition of all of the Masons in France. So they were already making deals with people in this area called the Swiss Confederation in 3 rural communities. And they made an alliance, and they were they were guarding this Swiss Confederation against encroachments by would-be overlords, that's part of history. And that's how it ties in. So they were already there, and it's my opinion they moved there, and they started their banking. And that was the rise. If you study the history of Switzerland, that was the rise of Switzerland, starting in the early 1300s or the 14th century. And then, of course, they became the country that we know now in the mid-1800s. So Switzerland became the banking center of the Masons. That's where all of their money went to that they had been gaining. Now, they had to go underground. They completely changed their names to, well, a couple of different things. They called themselves, I believe, the Martyrs of Christ and the, I'm trying to remember some of the other names that they were still warring against the Teutonic Knights and the Knights Hospitaller, but I don't remember the names that they were calling themselves. But anyway, they surfaced in England or in the somewhere in 1500s, 1400s, 1500s, and they started practicing with an actual lodge called the Masons, and the Freemasons came once they came to the U.S., but Masons is what they were called there. Now, they had been, the reason it's called Masons, obviously, is they were hiring highly skilled people because the Vatican was trying to kill them for knowledge that was considered heresy. They had to be able to get this information to people that they felt worthy of the information in a way that was not direct and that they could not be killed for. So they hired Masons to build structures with symbology in it, and they started building a story using symbology, much like hieroglyphics is a language of symbology that tells a story. It doesn't necessarily just make phonetic sounds, it tells a story. So that's what they're trying to do with these images. And so they became known as the Masons because they were building all of these temples, obviously some incredible churches. They were contracted by the Vatican to build some beautiful, beautiful, incredible structures in the world because of their abilities, their art, and the symbology. You know, what's kind of interesting is that they were putting a lot of Mason symbology in there that the Vatican didn't understand. They just thought it was nice, you know, beautiful artwork. But like the one that you're talking about tonight here, you know, the Chartres Cathedral.
Chartres Cathedral.
Yeah, right. It's one of those gorgeous, gorgeous cathedrals that they built, and it's an incredibly important fourth step of enlightenment into all the Masons. And they've done this right at the, you know, on the dime of the Vatican. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you got to admit, that's got to be sweet, at least for the guys that were building it. You know, sitting there, I could just see them afterwards going, oh, boy, we're having fun in there picking up the tab. And, you know, wouldn't we all love to have it go that way when we go to the restaurant? But,
yeah, wouldn't it?
Yeah, really. We're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to give everybody a couple of minutes here. And when we come back, because now we started in this hour with Chartres Cathedral, and we are back to it with a lot of history and context, which was really valuable. So for you listeners out there, first off, to those of you in the chat room, I'm getting reports from engineering that we are getting some nasties out there that are trying to disrupt that. Please be patient, and Bill is on it. And with that, we're going to cut for a couple of minutes here with a song. It's Bésame Mucho, and the reason why I want to play it is that there's a very interesting song. This was, when I was writing the commentary to 2012 Wisdom of the Elohim, this was a song I was playing quite often, actually, and the reason why is Bésame Mucho, which is, you know, just kiss me. It's a song about kissing. It came out in 1940. It was written by a teenager. And interestingly enough, one of the most passionate love songs, and she had never been kissed. You know, that was it. All she knew about kissing was what she had been told at church. It's bad. You don't do it. And yet, she wrote Bésame Mucho. And if you take the time to actually, if you don't speak Spanish, to read the lyrics, what you see is someone saying, kiss me, I'm losing you. I'm losing you. And the reason why that song was important to me when I was writing 2012 Wisdom of the Elohim was that there's a section there called The Long Goodbyes. And when I was writing that part of the book, I just kept playing Bésame Mucho again and again because it helped me to visualize in my mind people making tearful goodbyes. So this is going to go for 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and y'all can get the tea on, take care of business, and be right back. And hey, Dan, here we are. We're back from Besame Mucho. And for those of you out there, we were chit-chatting in the screening room and about some technical issues, and I think Bill's got those well in hand. So we're at the Chartres Cathedral. Let's start from there, Dan.
Well, what else would you like to know? There's a lot to talk about. That
sounds like, what else do I want to know? I mean, it's like, that's Mel Brooks' History of the World, Part 2.
Well, this is let's start at the Chartres Cathedral then, and I think that
Chartres
we're pretty much
Cathedral, you
common.
got it.
We were back there, and we were talking about the sun oracle that actually shows a sun with the planets around it set for a date that happens to align with December 21st of 2012, uniquely so, or did anyway, and now it is aligned for the comet element to come around, which is quite interesting. We're going to have to research that a little bit more. Ellen, you and I have had talked about Elemen quite a bit, and about its impact and what influence it might have.
Well, the celestial alignment, I mean, the celestial clock, and actually you can't call it a clock, it's a decorative fixture, because they were told not to put the mechanism in there.
Right.
But it was intentionally flipped. But now it's showing orbital parameters for Comet Elenin. And this, as of 2009, the question is if they're getting these orbital parameters for Comet Elenin in 2009, and it wasn't discovered until this year,
I read an article.
What does that say?
I read an article recently that said that these people who are predicting that a brown dwarf is going to come around in 2012 have the year wrong. And this was an article written by a government representative, a federal government representative. So it's rather interesting that he didn't deny that one was coming. What he denied was, or what he said was, you just have the year wrong. Now, I don't know if the year is wrong or not. There's a lot of very diverse different things, including the Great Pyramid of Giza, that point toward 2012, and cultures from all over the world. And, it's possible that all the cultures have carried a common story from the great dispensation of wisdom that occurred. But, that's like post-Assyrian. But nonetheless, I think that it's very interesting that we get crop circles, we get the Great Pyramid of Giza, we've got all of these different stories from the Apache, the Hopi, the Zulu, the Maya and the Aztecs, all these different cultures, including the I Ching, and that are all pointing toward 2012. And I'm no prophet. All I can do is study science and tell you what it looks like and what's probability. But there sure is a lot that's pointing toward that. What I wonder is, was the flipping of the clock a disinformation when it was originally on Planet X?
Maybe they're just changing. Maybe they're just changing the sign. I mean, things change. I found it's interesting it points to Comet Elenin. Of course, I get a lot of folks that are saying, well, according to the modern-day Mayan elders, that Comet Holmes in 2007, which at one point was the brightest object in the celestial sky for us, was the Blue Kachina. But I've never really accepted that, because you look at how everything I've read about the Blue Kachina Hopi prophecy says is, well, the Blue Kachina is going to get our attention. Holmes did not get anybody's attention. It was a nice big blue comet, but it did not get people's attentions. Nobody woke up to it. It didn't get everyone thinking, we're not in Kansas, Toto, or however you say that in Hopi. And, so I think 2007 Holmes, it lends itself very well at one level to the Blue Kachina prophecy. But I think in the final analysis, it doesn't satisfy the other requirements of the prophecy. It doesn't get us focused on the making a choice. And that's really what the Blue Kachina does. It makes people take a hard choice. Either they're going to return to the old ways or they're not. Right. It's going to, and when you read a lot of the prophecy in this time from all kinds of secular and non-secular prophecy, most particularly I find interesting like the Torah codes, which is a much more expanded version of Bible code that Drazen did. But we're looking at 2012, 2013 being a time of redemption. And that's what they call it, is a time of redemption. Well, you're not going to have redemption unless people are going, uh-oh, there's a new sheriff in town. We got to do something a little different. And we got to get in good graces. And so I still think it's coming. I think, you know, common elenin is going to be the blue kachina. Or, I mean, it could be something else. You know, you always have to have an open mind to.
I don't think that the elenin is where the Anunnaki are coming from, because they themselves describe, you know, their solar system as having this red sun, you know, with multiple planets that are revolving around it. And, of course, elenin is just a single comet. It's not a protoplanetary disk the way the brown dwarf is. So I feel like that we're really looking for a protoplanetary disk here. You know, we're looking for another solar system with a sun that's actually orbiting around ours, much like what you had, you know, hypothecated several years ago in your twin star CD that you put out. Could we see two suns by, I believe, I don't remember when the year was that you, but I think that was something. It was called something like, could we possibly see two suns by 2012 or something?
Right.
You were talking about.
It's on the Colburn podcast. And this is, could we see two suns in 5 years? And I did that 5 years ago. And so now we're really looking at this. One thing I'm studying and I'm finding interesting, Dan, is there's so much awareness now about two sun imagery. And there's a lot of them on. I mean, we're starting to track them down. But I will tell you this, tell my listeners out there, there's a big shift right now in terms of what's being reported on YouTube about two sun videos. And I think it's important for everyone to know. When we wrote our article back in, I think, 2008 about it, all we were seeing was definite disinformation, hoax, or nonsense. Okay, you know, get a cheap cell phone, smear up the lens, hang it out the window, aim it at the sun, wait till you get a flare. You're in a car, it's anonymous posting, you don't know where they are, you know, it's all this stuff. They're throwing it out there and saying, this is it, this is it, this is it, this is it. And I knew who was doing it, all right? And I'll tell you, 90% of the disinformation comes out of London, or more particularly the Crown. That is the city-state that is inside London. And that is 90% of the disinformation on Planet X right there, with the United States and Australia running close seconds, and then there's others. But, you know, this big shift that I'm seeing is in a public awareness. People are putting up authentic images. Now, in most cases, yes, they're still lens flares, but there are ones that it's difficult to explain them. But I'm seeing more authentic stuff, not that we can say, yes, you definitely got a picture of two suns. And so we've been following that, and there's an incredible growth of these things being reported. So I'm really happy to see that level of awareness coming. But let's get back to Chartres Cathedral here, and then move forward from there.
Well, real quick, I just wanted to throw a couple of sidelines in there. I think that's you know, this awareness, I think the governments of the world are becoming very aware. Philip Schneider, once he found out some of the things that were going on in the world to bring about a one-world government, and under what we know as the Bilderberg Group, you know, the countries like Japan and China and Switzerland and Sweden and the Netherlands, they all contracted with him to come over and speak to them and tell them about what was going on and what he found out. Which, you know, of course, cost him his life, but perhaps he made some people aware. And none of us can deny the fact that governments all over the world are building deep underground military bases to house tens and hundreds of thousands of people. Not millions and not billions, but hundreds of thousands. I think Sweden is the only country in the world that can house every citizen underground. They built a bunker to house every citizen underground that is actual naturalized citizen of the country. Everyone else has some portion. And, of course, we've got 131 of them here in the U.S., and we could not begin to start housing all the people in the U.S., 365 million people. There's no way, you know. But the government is aware of something. Now, what are they aware of? Are they worried about atomic war? Maybe, you know, maybe they think that they're going to, you know, have a certain surviving part of the race. But why would they do that? Why? I mean, unless they knew it was absolutely imminent. I think they would. They believe that they have more control over that because they didn't start this big race to pour trillions of dollars into building a deep underground military bases until the 90s. Well, why in the 90s? Well, it's kind of interesting that the Nineveh archives were being translated in the 90s. That's very interesting to me. I think that governments all over the world are preparing for something. There's a company in Oregon that makes food, dehydrated food, and they might normally ship 100,000 cans of food, you know, say in a month. But FEMA and the military has been buying over 1 million cans a month to stock underground military bases. Now, FEMA's been buying some also to stock the above-ground FEMA camps. But what are those for? We won't talk about that. But why do we have 800 prison camps on the surface that are run by FEMA? You know, that's another big question. What's going on in the governments around the world? Why? What are they preparing for, and what do they know?
Okay, well, let's start with those FEMA camps, all right? You know, why? What do you think?
Well, do you want to jump off on that topic, or do you want to go back? I think that once there's a couple possibilities here. Number one, I think many people can see that there is a highly organized, incredibly wealthy attack on the U.S. to dismantle it. There are people who are outspoken about it and will tell you that, and they're specifically from the Bilderberg Group, that will tell you in person, you will not recognize the United States in 2012, by the end of 2012, because they're dismantling it. We're in a war. We're not in a war right now that's bloodshed specifically, like a civil war or a war with another country, but we're having bloodshed through false flags like 9/11, 9/11. 9/11 was a false flag to get us to allow the Patriot Act and the Homeland Security Act to be passed, which basically usurped our Constitution, so that our now president can go do things like build a pact between Canada and the United States to build a super state without even the opinion, vote, or word from the Congress or the House or the people. You know, we're now part of a super state. Canada and the United States are one nation. The Bilderberg told us years ago that they were going to build the North American Union, and there would be a new currency called the Euro. They told us this years ago, and it's happening. And it shouldn't be a surprise. Asia's going to, the same thing's going to happen with Asia. They told us we're going to build one currency in Europe. They have the euro. We're going to have the Euro here in Mexico, United States, and Canada will be one more large labor union called the North American Union, and then we'll have the Asian Union. So this has all been planned. It's incredibly well structured, and what's really interesting is these people who are powerful and wealthy and have been taking $2.5 trillion out of our general funds without our permission are the same people that are the descendants of the order that were the Knights Templar. They have the same knowledge. These people are high-order Masons who have read the same writings of Mercury that the Knights Templar read. They just learned how to do it a lot smarter way. And they got a lot of money. They got a lot of people owing them, which is exactly what they did with the kings, which is what brought retribution on them in the first place.
Right.
They know this stuff. They know about a brown dwarf. They know about the Anunnaki. They know about other races. The Council of Foreign Relations has numerous people that are involved in space programs. And by the way, what the heck is with us dissolving NASA? And now we're just going to send four astronauts to ride with Russian? We're going to hand our space program over to Russia? I mean, why would we do that? I mean, we're really taking away the glory of the United States and all that we have stood for and the things that we've won in races. This is the fall of Rome all over again. You know, the United States and Britain as a pair have been the Roman Empire for a while, and we're falling. And
that's right. You know, that's right. Our astronauts are going to have to learn a new phrase.
That's right.
But my dinghy.
Yeah,
Russian for here's my money.
Well, the Masons are well ordered, and they have taken their wealth. They've invested it wisely. They have loaned the entire world. They have not taken the side of anyone, but tried to help everyone. They've made a tremendous amount of money off of it, and there are families that are deeply rooted. For instance, of the Sinclairs. You know, this is one of the family that is that built the final church that you go and visit. It's actually the 8th church. It's not the 7th church. It's the 8th church. They go and visit at the end of the 7 steps of enlightenment, and that is Rosalind. in the UK. It's a beautiful, gorgeous church. It was privately funded and built by the Sinclairs, and it is the end of the journey of enlightenment. There are families that are incredibly wealthy. They can they can spend literally $100 million every day of their life and not begin to exhaust the wealth they have. They have, these are very powerful, very wealthy people because people owe them money and they control them. And they control markets and they control economies, just like they did the Mediterranean. They controlled the entire economy of the Mediterranean when they had their ships. They know how to do that. And they've learned a lot from the writings of Mercury. They know about other races. They know that we're one small rock with a beautiful planet in the middle of a vast universe, and that other races might like to live here. And because it's a really nice place to live on the surface, they don't have to build deep underground military bases to live in or underground bunkers or whatever. They can.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Since you have these secret societies, are they, let's put it in context with the Anunnaki, since we're saying there's multiple races, so you can't toss out the Anunnaki. Is their goal to make some sort of bargain with the Anunnaki to say, okay, we took care of things, so when you get here, leave us taking care of things? Or is it something where they're intending to fight the Anunnaki for control of the planet, or are they just simply trying to turn Earth into basically a cosmic timeshare destination?
Their allegiance is to bring one man into power. And it is gained, they don't gain this knowledge until the 33rd level, which is the top level of Masons. I won't share how I know this, but I know this personally. It is, they are to take an oath that is called the Luciferian Oath. Now, whether the man's name is Lucifer or not, I'm not even going to go there. But it could be anything. But the oath is called the Luciferian Oath. And it is the oath that they will pledge their life, their wealth, and their knowledge and their power to bring about the empowerment of one man to become the Lord of the earth, a world power, and he will rule over the entire earth. And they, under him, as his sublords, I don't know what you want to call them. And the whole goal is here, think about this, you are now the trustee of a planet, not of a country, not of some people, not of a company, not of $1 million, but of a planet. And you have to make sure and ensure, you have to ensure the longevity of this planet. You have to calculate its resources, calculate the rate of usage. Now, let's talk about that just a minute. We're talking on renewable energy. And they would think, okay, well, what if we're consuming resources too fast? What would they do about that? Well, let me show you what they do about that. There's a sect of the Masons called the Rosicrucians. And there is a guide stone, a large monolith, 19 feet tall, outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and there are others like it around the world, but the one that you can go see and study here in the U.S. is outside of Atlanta, called the Atlanta Guide Stone. If you read it, it is the 10 Commandments of the New World Order. That's what it says. And the first commandment...
That's exactly it. Yeah.
And the first commandment is maintain the Earth population at 500 million people, not 6 billion. 500 million. Now, what are we going to do with the other 5.5 billion people? I'm not even going to go there right now. Here's a group of men who are looking at preserving the earth for themselves. They want to be lords of the earth, and they want to use people as a resource of enslavement, not necessarily the type that you think about where they're beating them on the backs with whips and that type of stuff. But there's an incredible book called The Real Cost of Everything. It's about 6 inches thick, and it's a model of the world's economy, of how every person throughout the course of their usable life will create $600,000 in profit. A person goes to work for a company that either belongs to the government or is the government. They are paid, they may create a profit for that company. And their wages that they pay them are then gone and they are spent by other companies that are owned by the same government, so that all the money that you make even goes back to them. So the only thing they're losing is you, and you have a lifespan. And they have to pay a retirement, they have to pay health care, they have to provide a place for you to live, food, water, all these resources to keep you alive, and some entertainment to keep you happy, and a constitution, a world constitution, that will make you have some choices about what kind of entertainment you want. So this is the goal of people who are who are Earth conquerors. We're talking about planet conquerors. They think about all of the resources they have. Number one, they have this huge workforce, but they can only maintain them at 500 million. They're going to let 6 billion people live here anymore because they consume resources too quickly. They only want 500 million. And I think it's very interesting that a recent movie, Transformers 3, that's what it was, came out. It's very interesting. Last February of last year, there was a particular gentleman that the member of the Bilderberg group said he was telling us several things to listen to look for, just as out of kind of his heart to let us know what's going on. And he said one of the things is watch Hollywood. We're trying to tell you something. Okay, so take that to heart, and you can do with it what you want to. I found it very interesting that there's this common theme that we're going to be attacked by aliens, that aliens are coming, that the Earth's
yeah, I mean, look at the movies.
And
you have the Battle of Los Angeles, Skyline.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, right now on TV, they've got The Falling. They've got The Falling. There's no more warm and fuzzy E.T. Spielberg.
No, there's not.
No more E.T. phone home. No, I mean, it's like, hey, we're here from outer space, and we're going to eat your face off.
One of the interesting things about Transformers is that they're only here for one resource, and that was all the people to become slave labor. That's very interesting, But nonetheless, if you people who listen to Prison Planet with Alex Jones, whether we like him or not, or whoever he is, he's got some good, well-researched information about much of what I'm telling you. He's saying much of the same thing I'm telling you. But here are men who are planning on capitalizing on the resources of a planet, living like gods, and trading with intergalactically. They're going to start trading with other races. They're going to create things. They're going to sell things. They're going to gain technology. They're going to give technology. They're going to provide a slave race, not necessarily the kind, again, but, that we are used to the beatings of a slave, but ones who will never acquire a wealthy position. They will all be paid approximately the same amount. They'll be incentivized. If you do really good and you're really smart and you do a lot of good things for us, we're going to be a little nicer to you. But no one would be able to attain their level of attainment the way the United States was founded with capitalism, where anyone can become wealthy. That's not going to happen anymore. So they are aware of these out there, and they know that they can trade. They know they can sell gold to the Anunnaki because the Anunnaki need gold. And why is it that gold is such a precious metal around here anyway? What picked gold from platinum? Or why is it the standard? It's very interesting that that's what the Anunnaki need to keep their planet alive, to put up in the air and to maintain, to fill that ozone hole.
Well, I have to tell you, years ago when I was in college, I was a young man, I got the gold bug. I got gold fever.
Yep.
And, I was in college back then. I mean, we tried everything, right? And you could get high on all kinds of things, but nothing is as sweet as the high of gold fever. All you got to be doing is thinking you are on the way to finding it, and that's it. You don't feel pain. You don't feel anything other than you just are completely consumed. And you don't get platinum fever.
No,
you don't get diamond fever. I mean, there are other substances worth more money than gold.
Yes,
you don't get fever about those, but gold, we get it. And here's an interesting thing. When this guy, Philip Kahn, was arrested in New York, my wife was reading in Russia what they were saying on Pravda and other sites. And of course, you got to remember, I mean, they got an unholy grapevine over there. But they said that it was political. Philip Kahn was getting ready to announce that a good deal of the gold in Fort Knox is gone. And that was why they dropped the hammer on him. He was ready to go public with that.
Well, that's not the first time that's happened.
Yeah, it's not the first time. And, I mean, now when you look back in retrospect, it definitely looked like a political axe job on this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so after seeing it, yeah, they still say, well, the rape charges are standing. Yeah, well, they're standing on sand. That's what they're standing on. This guy will go. The damage is done. He's been neutralized. And, it just, when you look at this and you have a story coming out of Russia, which is, and there's a lot of stuff that we find out of the Russian sites. And interestingly enough, we find corroboration for it elsewhere. So there's stuff that's purely speculative, and they're just pulling nonsense out of their ears. But sometimes they come across a pearl, and this is one of those things that just really, really stuck in my mind. That a lot of the gold that's in Fort Knox is gone. If it's gone, then the question is, where is it gone to, and to what purpose?
Mm-hmm. And to what purpose? That's a good question.
Yeah, and there's only one other place where you're going to find that much gold is under the runways in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, this is a pretty interesting thing. So if the Anunnaki are returning and these guys are hoarding the gold, it could be what? Some sort of bribe payment? Something to set themselves up?
Maybe.
What do you think?
It could be that they are I know that they have been told multiple times that they have to get the Earth in order as far as resources and then the rate at which they're being consumed. And I think they're way behind, which is why we see this big jump on the green energy bill right now, and trying to make green come around and people not use as much, and trying to charge large amounts for it so people won't use it. And it's just very interesting that they've been told this by the Anunnaki, that they've got to start taking care of the Earth. Because the Anunnaki would really like to live here. They loved living here whenever they visited thousands of years ago. I mean, they set up big Parthenons and temples, and they loved it. And they loved having the people, serve them and stuff. And we're not talking about God, and we're not talking about Jesus or any of that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the Greco-Roman gods of mythology that we know as the Anunnaki, that are the inhabitants of one or more of 7 planets that revolve around this brown dwarf that we call Planet X, which is simply another sun that revolves around our sun. The 2 suns revolve around each other. And you have stated before that 85% of all of the stars in our galaxy are part of a binary star system. They have 2 stars that revolve around each other. So why should we be any different, or why should we be surprised that we have a twin star that we revolve around? And it would explain a lot of the historical texts that we have about what occurs whenever we run into this other star and have a confrontation with it. So nonetheless, we were talking about Masons and what they're wanting to do, and their goal is that if they make it high enough up into the Masonic order, these men are going to be very talented, knowledgeable, well-usable, well-molded, very loyal, and whenever they give an allegiance, they can count on it, and they will be rewarded or granted, lordship over, a city or something whenever the Anunnaki return. Now, let's talk about Anunnaki. I don't think that's the only people that are going to be here. I think there's going to be some sort of a war going on here. Because,
okay, who's coming to dinner? Who's coming to dinner?
Well, that's a good question. The Mayans aren't talking about people that look like us that are returning. They're talking about a feathered snake returning. Now, that's a completely different race of people, the different race of beings. That is not the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki look like us. They're just bigger than we are, okay? But they look just like us. And they may be more powerful with more, telegenetic, telekinetic, telepathic capabilities, but they don't look like feathered snakes. Okay, so that's a completely different race called the Draconians. So and so the Mayans are saying that their feathered snake is coming back in 2012, and the Anunnaki saying, well, we're coming back in 2012. And why 2012? The only thing I can figure is it's very easy for space travel because of this galactic alignment. Whenever you have I've heard physicists say that there's absolutely no part of physics that says that an alignment of galaxy, solar system, and the galactic elliptical makes it doesn't change gravity at all, except that in every model that we've run, it substantially amplifies it. So maybe it's easier or more quick it's quicker to travel between planets using the anti-gravitational technology that they have, that they've given our governments, that we have now. In fact, we commonly admit that. I'm going to talk about something here in a second that I just remembered. Maybe it's easier during that time. But nonetheless, it seems to be a very key point, and there's multiple different places it's coming from. It's not just from historical texts. It's from the new crop circles. It's from, you know, the wisdom of the Elohim. It's from the people that are trying to protect us from the bad guys that are here, because there's multiple people, multiple races. Some are benevolent, and some want to take over the earth and use it as their own home. They don't necessarily want to kill us all. They want to keep some of us around to, you know, worship them and build them temples and whatever else. But they may want them to do. And again, I'm not trying to offend any people. I'm not talking about Allah. I'm not talking about God or Jehovah. I'm talking about Greco-Roman gods who thought in our mythology that they consider themselves gods because they're more capable than we are genetically. They're a higher, more highly evolved being, but they look like us. So I don't know who's all's going to be here, but there's going to be more than one. You know, there's going to be feathered snakes. There are dragons. China says that. I Ching says that. The Mayans say that. You know, the Nineveh archives say that there's going to be a humanoid person that's going to be here, that's going to return. The Bible says some things that coincide exactly. Revelations and Daniel and Joel and some other ones overlay and coincide perfectly with what the Colburn says is going to occur, which has occurred in the past. So it's all one big science and a thing we're going to have to try to figure out. But I think there's going to be multiple people here, and I think that each one of them want to maybe use the Earth as their little new planet that they want to live on, you know, and these humans are easy to overcome because they have superior technology, they have superior, you know, intellectual capabilities. They've been around for how long? Millions of years maybe, and we've been around for 10,000? What do we know? You know, nothing compared to them. So they can pretty much, we're easily extinguishable, but doesn't mean they want to get rid of all of us because we can make pretty good slaves and we can speak. So maybe they could make conversation with them to amuse themselves or whatever the case. I'm coming up with just some hypothetical jocularity here, but there's going to be more than one. You know, if this really is going to happen, if 2012 is real, and I'm no prophet, but if it's real, then we're going to have multiple races here, all contending for the same planet because it's a really nice planet. I mean, it's got all this gorgeous water, and it's got sunrises and sunsets that, you know, against clouds, and it's got thunderstorms and fresh water and a nice atmosphere, nice thick atmosphere, and the temperature's comfortable to humanoids and maybe some other ones too, you know. So
and look at the diversity of life.
Yeah,
genetically speaking,
we're going to have multiple races here.
We're going to have, I mean, genetically speaking, we're just going to have a lot of folks here. You know, I mean, as you're talking, after we brought out Cross Planet X Forecast, I started working actually at that point towards the next book, which turned out to be Crossing the Cusp. And I did about 18 months of channeling research with numerous sensitives and all kinds of entities. And we took a scientific approach to it as best as possible. We had a protocol. And the protocol was, you know, number one, there are no authoritative voices, so it's not something where somebody says, I got all the answers, you come to me, don't go anywhere else. If we got that, we just simply said, thank you, we're leaving. You know, we would go off. The other thing is we would use internal logic to test to see if we had channel filtering, and that was an important thing. Because channels, the sensitives are always worried that if they say something that someone else is not going to like, even if it's coming from the other side, they're the ones that are going to catch the hell. So they might filter it. And that really then, you know, muddles the message, takes it in a different direction. And then the third part of the protocol was that we were looking at trends as opposed to specifics. And the way we would vet them is say, we would do the research, you know, ask all the questions. We were there in an honest conversation. But we would say, just so that we can validate you, give us a significant weather event 3 to 6 months out. You know, take us beyond whatever capability we have here to even think about what could happen with weather. And I can tell you that they were always dead on. They would say in 5 months, You're going to see a typhoon that's going to head towards Baja and turn north towards San Diego, and either it's going to hit San Diego or peter out. Boom, happens exactly. You know, this is what your next hurricane season is going to be like. Boom, it's exactly. Those
Sounds
kind
like
of
their
things
modeling
you
is a
see.
little more advanced than ours, huh?
Absolutely, but you know the one thing they couldn't model? Free will.
Yeah, that's
Asking
right.
questions about politics, that's it. They just simply, no, we're not even going there. You know, you guys change your minds on a dime. Get out of Dodge. You know, but
I got a question
the
for
message, yeah.
You go ahead and finish what you're saying first.
Okay, the message coming out from them, time and again, was, in essence, what they were saying to us is, look, it's your world. And you've got all these races, and they have all kinds of intentions. And you have exploiters, and then you have folks that just simply want to strip mine you and leave you dead. All right? And that's a real possibility. But on the other hand, what they were saying is that the way that all of these other races work with each other out there in the universe is that if it's your world, and you're going to stand for your world as a united species, you can keep it. And if you can be divided, then that's it. You know, if you stand as a united species and you say, it's our world, each of us says, it's my planet too, and we stand up together, and we forget all the things that divide us, and we just come together as one species, then we're going to come out okay. We're going to get to keep our planet. We're going to be left alone. But if folks can trick us into division, hates, fears, so that we lack the ability to come together with uniformity, that's it. And that is the reason why, you know, all of the disinformation attacks we've been talking about, the suppression, all of this, that is part and parcel of that. And this is something where, yeah, you know, the folks that are doing it, and your explanation is that they're simply setting up shop, okay? They want to turn Earth into a travel and resource destination for other species in the cosmos and profit from it, and we're all going to be their little doting minions. But that's all very much a negative model. What the other races are telling us is that, look, guys, you're at an evolutionary junction. You are either going to go one of two ways. You are either going to become a peaceful, space-faring nation and join with other races on that basis, or you're going to consign yourself to countless generations of slavery, and you're not going to be given your freedom until there's really nothing left to take. You've got a wasted world. It's raped. And one of the races when we were contacting other entities through the sensitives, it would be incarnated, unincarnated, incarnated, and extraterrestrial. Unincarnated meant that they never had been in a human form. Incarnated, that they had been in a human form, and then the alien races. And there were races that were coming through that were saying, we made a bad call, and now we've got a wasted world. And we're trying to reach across this span of time to tell you, don't make the mistake we did, that it's not about them. It's about you. If you pull together as a unified species, if you're in it for your species, you'll be okay, because with that, the bad guy's got to pull back, because that's the way it operates in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, if you're stupid enough to go drunk to the table and you put down your paycheck on red 7 and it doesn't come up, tough darts, farmer.
That's interesting about the way the universe works. You know, the Masons have a moral code that they have to tell you what they're going to do to you, but they're not going to come right out and tell you. Because if you don't understand the way they tell you, then you're not enlightened and you're not worthy anyway, and you might as well become a slave. But for those who have ears to hear and can understand what they're telling you and the way they say it, then maybe you're worthy to know and be able to try to save yourself before it comes along. I've got a question for you.
Sure.
What if Isaac Newton, being a Grand Mason, didn't discover gravity? What if he read it in the writings of Mercury about the laws of physics of gravity, and that he tried to express it and discover it as he read it in the writings of Mercury? Would this explain why the church so adamantly tried to crucify him and make him an outlaw? What about Galileo? Is it possible that Galileo, being a high-level Mason, read the writings of Mercury about our 9 planets and our sun and how that the planets revolve around the sun, and that we don't, the sun doesn't revolve around the earth? Maybe he read this and he set out to discover if this was really true and if he could document it. And when he did, the Church, the Vatican specifically, assaulted him, ultimately killed him for what he believed, because he brought forth something that was different than what people believed, but they thought it was absolute sacrilege and heresy because it was of the writings of Mercury. What about Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci? This was all during the time of the Renaissance, after the Dark Ages and after the medieval ages. We're starting to grow in wisdom and enlightenment and arts and science, and everything's becoming rejuvenated. Maybe Leonardo da Vinci was an incredibly high Mason and a Grand Master himself. And he was incredibly knowledgeable about science. And maybe the inventions he came up with were things that were talked about in the writings of Mercury that he had read. So maybe these jumps in our cultural evolution were not sudden mind springs of thought, but simply the discovery of something that they had been taught. I'll leave that thought with you.
Yeah. It's funny that you would make that observation, because Sue just sent me something. It was a comment from the chat room. And in light of what you just said, I want to read this. It's from a fellow Boris Artemenko. And why do we always think the worst? Why not consider that maybe our present technological advance has made us serious candidates to become a part of a cosmic federation of races?
That's one of the possibilities. I truly believe that is one of the possibilities that we have before us. I also think that there are others that don't want that to happen. They want to have that intermediary control over the resources of the earth. They don't want the people of the earth as a whole to have that status.
I think you're right. I think what this really comes down to is we as a species are at this point, and that's the one thing that when we did the channeling study just came through again and again and again. We as a species are on the verge of an evolutionary step forward. In other words, going from...
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, say, for example, we're going from Homo sapien to Homo spiritual, all right? And, prophecy talks about us having a millennium of peace. And when I looked at all of this, and my thinking on it from a big picture standpoint is that's where we're at. And if we get that millennium of peace, we're going to need it, because our planet is, when you look at, for example, I think 3797 is when Nostradamus talks about it, that's it, game over. Well, if we have a flyby of Planet X now and it is in a destabilized orbit, that we're going to have some sort of celestial event where a massive object is hitting the storm and just hitting the sun and then just creating something furious. The result of that is, our planet just gets cooked in its own juices, and that's it. We turn into something that looks like Venus, and Mars winds up in the Goldilocks zone for another shot at, having life there. So we have 1,000 years, and it's how we use that 1,000 years to get off this planet and to get out there. I mean, there is so much at stake, and I will tell you, my personal feeling as I wrap up the show is we're the ones holding a straight flush. Okay? And it's the schmucks out there that are holding inside straights and they can't fill the hand, and the only way they're going to do it is if they can bet us out of the game or bluff us out of the game.
I encourage the listeners to watch 2 DVDs. One's called What the Bleep Do We Know? And the second one's called What the Bleep Down the Rabbit Hole. It's talking about exactly what you're talking about, but all the speakers in the DVDs are professors of physics and quantum mechanics. They are professors of physics and quantum mechanics, not theologians, not philosophers, and they're saying exactly what you're talking about, that this is the apex of getting off the fence. It's going to be a point where we have the choice of creating our future. What do we choose as a people, as a whole?
That's right. Dan, we just flat ran out of time. Sorry, good buddy. We're going to get you back on. We got to go. That's it. We're on.
It sure has been a good time.
we're getting into a topic that's actually pivotal in the research that I'm currently doing right now. Now, as you know, the title of our show is, we're looking at the history of secret societies and Planet X. What have they known? How long have they known it? Well, to me, we always talk about that. The question is what they're doing about it. And I'll tell you, I have been working on this, doing some research with another fellow who's actually been on the show before, Richard St. Laurent. And we started looking into a comparison between the Avebury 2008 formation that I decode in a series of 50 slides in my book, Crossing the Cusp. And what we found was that the exact same celestial alignment for Planet X appears in a cathedral that was built in France some 500 years ago. And it was really amazing. And it's what you call a spot, a single point of truth. You start there, and then it starts taking you into other places. And you really start seeing things go blink, 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 blinks, like lights coming on in a stadium. And it's a huge picture. And so how does that bring me to this conversation with Dan Dean? I've known Dan for years. Fine gentleman. He's been on the show before, both this show and Cut to the Chase. And you never know what you're going to be talking about, and I guess, until you start talking about it. And I got into discussing this with Dan and found that, my gosh, my golly, he is a huge source of information. And so with that, I'm going to bring Dan in, and we're going to get right into what's going on here. Dan, welcome to Planet X Special Report.
Good to be with you this evening.
Hey, it's good to see you, Dan. And, what I wanted to do was kind of start with that little bit of research I'm doing with St. Laurent, which is really going to be used for a video that I'm planning to put on YouTube later this summer.
Okay.
And this is the Chartres Cathedral in France. You're familiar with that?
Sure, yeah. It's the fourth stop on the 7 steps of enlightenment for the Masonic order.
Absolutely, absolutely. And let me tell you what we found, and then you just bounce off of that. How's that?
I'd love to.
Okay. And while we're doing that, for those of you out there, we've got Bill running the switchboard, and he's doing the call screening. And so if you got questions, you want to jump into this and have a little fun with us on the air, well, by golly, do that. Just call right on in, or you can Skype right on in from the episode page. That guest call-in number is 818-495-6962. Bill will take that screening call, and he'll want to know your name, location, and what you got in mind. And in the chat room, we have Sue from Mexico. Hello, Sue. I know you can't talk back except in the chat room, but if you've got a question out there in the virtual studio, folks, and you want to make sure that we cover that with our guest, make sure it comes to Sue's attention. And these folks both volunteer their time freely to Planet X Special Report, and they bring a huge amount of value to the show, make it ever so much more than it was before. Now, with that, let me talk about the Chartres Cathedral, because I was researching this with Richard St. Laurent, and he found that there is an astronomical clock that's in there, and it was built in this cathedral about 500 years ago, which was built by Freemasons, and as you pointed out, is in the 4th step, Dan. And what we found interesting was that the alignment is showing the actual trajectory for Planet X. And when you compare it to the Avebury 2008 formation that I document in my book, wow. I mean, it's just stunning. And when we looked at that, our jaws dropped. It's like, how do you have a 500-year-old church coinciding with the 2008 crop circle? So here comes the story, was that when the church was first built, it had this astronomical clock, and the best way, I guess, to describe that is, folks, when you're in school, we always, in science classes, there's an orrery, and this is just a little mechanical device. It's got a representation of the sun and then the planets and moons and going around it. And it's just a big old mechanical, like a big old grandfather's clock turned on its side, so to speak. And that's an orrery. Well, an astronomical clock, such as the Freemasons built 500 years ago, functioned somewhat like an orrery. It was in about the center of the Chartres Cathedral. But the interesting thing was it worked that way until the French Revolution. And then at the time of the French Revolution, two things happened to this astronomical clock. One, the mechanism was removed. And two, something was added to the face of the clock, and the dial was frozen at this trajectory for planet X. And it remained that way for hundreds of years until 2009. Abe Berry was in 2008. In 2009, there was an order placed by the caretakers, the custodians of the cathedral, to a special order of priests who all they do is repair old timepieces of any kind. That's their specialty. But they were told not to make the clock operational. That's interesting. Instead, the clock face was flipped and it was changed. And here's the kicker. It was changed to represent the orbit of Comet Elenin. And that happened in 2009. As Forrest Gump would say, it gets curiouser and curiouser. And so my question to you, Dan, is that just a big old coinky-dink?
Is it a coincidence? Well, the Comet Elenin is very interesting. I can tell you that the fact that the clock was stopped on the date of the alignment of Planet X, or this brown dwarf that we keep talking about, I don't believe it's a coincidence at all. This particular church is of the Order of the Lion of Masonic history. It's incredibly rich. It's one of the more powerful experiences for the Masons who go through 7 steps of enlightenment. And each step has a particular church, 7 churches across the world that they're supposed to visit, and there's a particular chakra associated with the body that it's supposed to open up and enhance and make them be illuminated or become awakened. And this particular church is the lion. Once you achieve the level of the lion, you visit the Sun Oracle. And this is what you're talking about, is the Sun Oracle in the church there. And this Sun Oracle is a very interesting piece, because this is where people become aware during the lion of the writings of Mercury pertaining to the history of kings on another planet, let's call it that, just another place, another, we have to go back to the theory of ancient astronauts here. We're only talking about another solar system that's orbiting ours, so now I have to talk about the theory of ancient astronauts, because in the writings of Mercury, which is something that the Masons read all the time, and every step they go through and they're able to read certain writings of Mercury, which is one of the gods. He was the god of communication of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, and even before that, the Egyptians and Sumerians. So he was the one who documented things for people to learn and taught them the things from the lowercase gods that we supposedly had visit here on the Earth. And in science, we call those ancient astronauts, if one wants to, believe that school of thought. But for here, we need to talk about that. So each time a Mason goes through and takes a new order, they are allowed to read new writings from Mercury, which give them an otherworldly perspective of our world. And this is the point at which they understand that there is now another inhabited planet or set of planets with more people on it that we interact with. So this is the 4th level. This is where they learn this. And so it's by no coincidence do I believe that the Sun Oracle, which has this astronomical time clock on it, is their 4th visit. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. I think it's part of the steps of realization of knowledge beyond ourselves and becoming aware of a intergalactic or even an intra-universal species of beings, all over the universe. That sounds a little far out, I know, but if we understand the Masons, that's what they're all about. So, and I know most people don't see the Masons as that. We see them as the good people who are there serving coffee and doing good things and being active in politics, and they are all of those things, and they're very influential, and some are extremely powerful. Some of our presidents were Masons, and 40 some odd of the people who signed our Declaration of Independence were Masons. So some of our greatest scientists, were Masons. In fact, some of them were Grand Masons. They were very high in the order. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. I've got something to kind of throw out at you, but we can talk about that later.
Okay. Well, if you got something to throw at me, I got something to throw at you.
Go ahead. You throw back first.
Question. Okay. All right. That's good. All right. It's a low ball. I get a lot of letters from folks now. I mean, it's popping up, and they're asking me, are the Anunnaki returning? And the Anunnaki, as described by Zecharia Sitchin in The 12th Planet and his whole series of books, are you willing to put a label on it? Are you saying they're waiting for this other race? Are they waiting specifically for the Anunnaki? Do you see any hint of a connection there?
I'm not going to say that it's specifically the Anunnaki. I believe that from my research, and my beliefs are not necessarily what someone else needs to believe, but I hold the opinion that the Anunnaki are a genetically superior race to our own. I believe that they were instrumental in what we call the Greco-Roman gods and the gods of even Sumeria and of Egypt. They have powers that are greater than our own. I also think that there are other interventions. And I want people for a moment just to consider the possibility. You don't have to believe this, and I know it's going to give some people a hard time, but, we're in a very small rock in an extremely huge, vast universe. It's pretty selfish for us to say that we are the only life in the entire universe and that life has only existed in the universe for 10,000 years and that we're it, guys. That's not a very, even looking at probability, that just isn't a very good perspective.
It's arrogant.
Well, I would say it is arrogant because,
it's arrogant.
The universe has been here, our planet has been here for 4 billion years. Think about how long, and we've got a young sun. Think about the old suns out there and the old galaxies. What about life out there in those places? And what about they could be 500,000 years into, science and have all sorts of space travel and be able to do things that we're still dreaming about. And they have the ability to visit our planet. And one of the reasons they would want to visit our planet would be because it's a beautiful planet. It has water and it has an atmosphere, and it's really enjoyable to live here on the surface. You don't have to live below the surface in order to really enjoy the beauty of the planet. That would make it highly sought after by multiple races if they were aware of the planet. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind that it's kind of like a beautiful, the beautiful land in the Middle East, the conflict between, various countries for the Temple Mount or, Palestine or Jerusalem. It's a beautiful, Palestine's known as the beautiful land, and there's some areas of it that really are pretty. I think they were a lot prettier several thousand years ago, but anyway, in that light, there is a lot of scientific, archaeological, and historical information that has been left imprinted on our planet as a thumbprint, so to speak, that these ancient astronauts have been here. One of those that you mentioned would have been the Nineveh Archives, which Zecharia Sitchin was one of 8 translators that began translating these Sumerian tablets into English and to other languages, and he put out his first book called The Lost Book of Enki, spelled E-N-K-I, and it was just a literal translation of a set of those texts, and it was scribed. It was the inscription by scribe of the words of an ancient astronaut by the name of Enki. And Enki talked all about other worlds, he described every planet in our solar system, including Pluto, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, which we hadn't even seen 6,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago, okay? And this was all written back then from a being who supposedly visited our Earth looking for gold to supposedly try to patch holes in the ozone of their own failing atmosphere in their planet. They had holes in their ozone. It was